DeVante Parker traded to the Patriots. What does that mean for Mac Jones and the rest of the receivers? And could Desmond Ridder be the best quarterback in this class? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome into the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. Welcome into our show, everybody. We've got a loaded and jam-packed segment here today on the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. I am Kate Magdziuk. You can follow me on Twitter at FFBallblast. And as always, I am joined by Marcus Mosher. You can follow him on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Give the show a follow at Locked On Dynasty. Hit that subscribe button anywhere you're listening to your fantasy football podcast, because you're going to want to bring us along. We're building the ultimate Dynasty Fantasy League. We're going to get you a Dynasty Championship, but only if you follow along. Maybe leave us some of those 5-star reviews. I don't know. What do you think, Marcus?
Yeah, I think so. We are actually playing in our first ever Dynasty League together. We're on the same team. Going against our arch enemy, Ryan McDowell. We'll have to start tweeting out some interesting picks from this league, to say the least, right? One yesterday that completely shocked me. Certain quarterback from Liberty went a little higher than I thought. But enough about that league. Let's talk about the actual NFL and some things that happened over the weekend. Kate, DeVante Parker traded to the New England Patriots. Not all that surprising, considering that the Dolphins, signed, or they traded for Tyreek Hill. They signed Cedric Wilson. Were you surprised that it was the Patriots, though, that they traded him to?
I mean, the fact that they're trading within their own division definitely sets off some alarm bells, I think, for me.
Sure.
I always hate to see those interdivisional trades because you know what that usually means? They think they're getting teams usually think they're going to get one over on it. You're not going to donate a player that you think is going to help come back to beat you twice a year to an opposing team. The compensation, pretty interesting. A 3rd-round pick, especially when you're looking back at like the Amari Cooper trade and what the Cleveland Browns had to give up to get Amari Cooper. The fact that DeVante Parker ended up being a 3rd-round pick worthy, that's kind of surprising for me. Only has one season with more than 1,000 receiving yards. And that same season, his only season with more than 800 receiving yards. So we don't have a huge track record of production, but I mean, he immediately adds a veteran presence to that locker room. I think he's a solid wide receiver. What does this mean for Mac Jones?
I mean, I think they needed this type of receiver. I mean, I'll just say this about Parker. I think he's immediately the best receiver on that Patriots team. Now, I know the bar is pretty low, but I think Nelson Aguilar is a complimentary receiver. Kendrick Bourne is not a fantasy relevant player. Jacoby Myers is adequate slot guy. But I think Parker gives them a legitimate wide receiver on the outside who can win the contested ball stuff. He can be your goal line receiver. I think this certainly helps Mac Jones. I don't see any way that it hurts it. But for me, Kate, I think this is the time to buy DeVante Parker right now on Dynasty League Football. Wide receiver 62. If you're getting the number one receiver on a team and maybe the number one passing option on a team, I think that's pretty good value at wide receiver 62. And it's not like he's old. I mean, he's a fairly, what is he, 28 years old probably? It's not like
29.
He's ancient.
He is 29.
29. If I can get solid production from him over the next couple of years, why not?
I think he's definitely an intriguing option. Hasn't been necessarily perfectly healthy, hasn't been totally available. He only has one season under his belt as a full complement of games back in 2019. And that was his season where he had his 1,200 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. So, I mean, that, if he's on the field, that's generally good news. Looking back to his fantasy relevance, when we look at just his overall splits and when he's been utilized, because I think that's definitely been a talking point too. He hasn't always been consistently utilized and necessarily gotten a wide receiver one target share. But in games where he's had 5 or more targets, he's averaging 14 PPR points per game, which I think you would take that
Sure.
any day of the week. Do you think 5 targets per game is a reasonable projection for him as like the auto wide receiver one with this team?
Yeah, and that feels low to me, honestly, Kate. I feel like 6, 7 feels way more realistic because they don't really have an outside receiver that they can rely on. And I think Mac Jones needs somebody that can, help him on 3rd and 4, get 7 yards, right? I think Parker's going to be locked into 100 plus targets this year. And I think that's why he's such a big value. And it's not like the Patriots didn't give up. It's not like they gave up a 6th or 7th round pick, and this is just a guy they're adding to the receiving core. Giving up a 3rd round pick probably means that they view him as, a guy that's going to really help the offense. So when they consider the contract they're paying him, the draft capital, and I just think he's the most talented receiver on the team. Yeah, I think he's a buy right now.
What are you willing to pay for DeVante Parker to get him on your roster?
Now that's a better question. I feel like a 2nd round pick in a rookie draft is probably too expensive, right? But a 3rd rounder, I don't know if it's enough. So if I could do a 3rd rounder plus some change, I think that probably makes sense.
Yeah, maybe throw in a low end wide receiver that hasn't necessarily been a sustainable asset for your fantasy teams. Maybe add in one of those guys, or maybe like a 2023 5th rounder or something, like
Well,
just something to make it feel like the scales are a little bit even
yeah,
out there. I think that feels about fair. But I would
on
start with the 3rd.
yeah, on Dynasty League football right now, that's actually what you're seeing. It's a lot of 3rd round picks. A 2024 3rd round pick, 2023 3rd round pick, 2022 3rd round pick. You're seeing him trade, but here's a 2nd round pick in 2023. That's basically the price point. Tyler Boyd straight up for DeVante Parker since the news. That feels about right for me. And if you just need wide receiver depth, or you need somebody that's just going to get a bunch of targets, especially in like a best ball league where you don't necessarily have to worry as much about the ebbs and flows of trying to figure out which weeks to start him and stuff. I think he's a great guy to trade for a 3rd round pick.
The Tyler Boyd for DeVante Parker straight up. That one's interesting for me because I'm thinking I really genuinely don't know which side of that I would prefer. It's probably DeVante Parker,
Yeah, which one
right?
has more
Just an
upside? For me, it's
opportunity.
Parker, right? Yeah, it's the upside, right? We kind of know what
If
Tyler
you were
Boyd
to
is.
know that the Bengals were going to move on from Tyler Boyd at some point in the next season or two, and he would get an opportunity maybe where he'd see more targets and a bigger targets share without Jamar Chase, without T. Higgins, would that change your mind at all?
No, I think that would make me feel a little worse about him because he's an older slot receiver that doesn't have a lot of speed. And as we saw, like in free agency this year, Kate, those guys just don't get paid very much, right? Like Juju Smith-Schuster didn't get paid a lot. Jarvis Landry's still sitting out in free agency right now. Like those guys just don't typically age well. So I don't even know if that one's close for me. Give me DeVante Parker.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
I'll roll with that.
Now let's talk about Desmond Ridder and where he fits in with the quarterback rankings, Kate. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Athletic Greens. Now I've been on Athletic Greens for I think 3 or 4 weeks now, and I absolutely love it. It has a very mild tropical taste that I actually look forward to drinking it every morning. So what is in this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins and minerals to help start your day off right. It costs you less than $3 a day, and that's cheaper than your cold brew coffee that you get in the morning at Tim Hortons or Starbucks. And in fact, it's cheaper than just going out and buying all of the vitamins and supplements yourself. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into the flu and cold season. It's just one scoop of water or one scoop in a cup of water every single day. That is it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to start looking after for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Excuse me. My wife actually takes the travel packs with her to work. She really likes them. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick the ultimate daily nutritional insurance app. Also want to tell you guys about Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including this week's Master Championship odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. Bet Online is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. I'm betting on Tiger this week just because it's going to be fun. Kate, Desmond Ridder, quarterback from Cincinnati. Some people really like Ridder. I've seen a couple people have him as their quarterback 1. Some people don't, and they have him as quarterback 6, 7. I even saw one major publication put him at quarterback 9. What do you think about Desmond Ridder?
I really like Desmond Ridder. And I quarterback 9. You're gonna have to out whomstever did this.
I will not do that because I really respect this person's work. So I'm not going to do that.
Man, I love some.
I'll tell you after the show.
I love some good spilling of tea, but that's fine. That's fine. I guess, all that good respect and stuff. But quarterback 9?
I know.
Come on. Desmond Ridder. Yes. Former 3-star recruit. Wasn't even like a conversation to be drafted as an NFL quarterback when he started his career at Cincinnati. He was a 4-year starter, and he kind of changed like the entire storyline of Cincinnati as a program. Like, he flipped the script. He had at least a .786 win percentage every single season with his team. That was the first season with a win rate that successful in general since the 2009 season. 3 of their best top 4 seasons at the school in their entire history were with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. Like, he very much changed the entire narrative of this program. And I think it's really incredible to see what he's done, considering his lowly starts as a 3-star recruit who nobody would have projected we'd be talking about. Like, Desmond Ridder, he's a hard worker. That's one of the things you hear over and over and over again is about his work ethic. He seems to be a great leader. And you know what? Crushed the combine. It is an incredible athlete. And I think we see based, not just from what we've seen at the combine, but I think there's still a lot left to unlock in terms of having him best utilize that athleticism to create plays at the NFL level. I like Desmond Ridder. I think he could be a very high upside quarterback at the NFL level if he gets a start. And I think that's the biggest question for me is, what is his trajectory looking like as a starter? PFF has him as the most pro-ready quarterback in this class. Agree or disagree?
I agree. 100% agree. So I'm gonna make a comp for him that's not stylistically, but kind of as prospects coming out. He reminds me a lot of Dak Prescott in the way that he just checks a lot of boxes. Let me lay it out. Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati takes his program and makes it the most successful that they've ever been, right? They go to the college football playoffs. Dak Prescott at Mississippi State, they beat Alabama, and they're the number 1 seed in the country. Both are really good athletes. Both have, I'd say, average arms, maybe slightly above average, but they don't have Trey Lance or Malik Willis arms or anything like that, right? They're just very solid. Yeah. Both have good accuracy, but not great accuracy. But the most important thing is the decision making. Like, it just seems like they rarely make the wrong read. And when you combine that with being very charismatic, being a great leader, and being athletic, That can go a long way, Kate. And if he gets to the right team and somebody just lets him kind of have a, shorter West Coast offense where he's just throwing the ball, 5 to 15 yards down the field and using his legs and reoption, I don't see why he can't be a really successful quarterback and a really dynamic fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I think there's definitely I don't know. I feel like there's just sort of the stigma against Desmond Ridder, and I think it comes from the fact that he hasn't been the flashiest prospect. Like
He doesn't
he's
have the
just
tool. That's the thing is everybody's looking for the next Josh Allen or the next Justin Herbert or the next Patrick Mahomes, and he just doesn't have those tools, right? But that doesn't mean you can't be a really good quarterback still.
yeah, I think that kind of setting the stage though for what tools put him in a position to be a successful fantasy quarterback. I think probably the safety that he has with his arm. I think he shows a lot of just that. I think we talked about this last week. You really like to see the quarterback making strides season to
Yes.
season,
Yes.
making those improvements. And outside of like a disappointing 2019, I think we saw like year to year just solid improvement and development from Desmond Ridder. Um, and again, going back to that rushing upside, we know that that's like the cheat code for fantasy. You can
Mhm.
get away with maybe not being a Josh Allen necessarily with the arm strength and the arm upside, which even that had been a question for Josh Allen, not necessarily the strength, but like, can he throw an accurate football? Like, that
Yes.
was part of the
Yeah.
narrative way back
Yeah.
when. And we saw him develop as a passer. I think Desmond Ritter's, floor as a passer is a lot safer than what we saw with Josh Allen. And
Sure.
I don't know. I just think there's a lot left on the table in terms of maybe developing like an offense, building an offense around him that complements his skill set. Now, I'm curious. So back in the 2021 season, this was like the worst season we really saw Desmond Ridder have in terms of his rushing production. Only season he had with fewer than 500 rushing yards. Um, saw a drop in efficiency too. Only 3.2 yards per rush
Mhm.
attempt, just wasn't overly efficient. Why do you think we saw that dip? Um, and should we be concerned at all? Like, do you think that maybe they're starting to get concerned about his frame? Because I think that's maybe the biggest concern, I guess, because he checks all the athletic
Right.
boxes,
Right.
but he's 6'1", 211. So he's got a slighter frame. If you're worried maybe about utilizing him heavily as a rusher and as a mobile quarterback at the NFL level, like, are you concerned about durability with him or what? Like, why did we see that drop off in the rushing production last year? Because I think we know the upsides there.
I honestly think a lot of it had to do with they just dominated a lot of teams. And because his passing was so good in the first half, they didn't need him to run a lot in the second half. He played a lot of ball control where they didn't put him in positions to get hurt. Um, they weren't quite as good in 2020, and that's why you saw him needing to use his legs more. But we should mention his rushing statistics in college because he is a really good runner. The first 3 years of his career, he had at least 580 rushing yards in every single season. In 2020, 12 rushing touchdowns. This year, yes, it dropped off to 355 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. But still, like if he can do that at the NFL level, and he's giving you, let's say, 400 rushing yards in a season and 6 rushing touchdowns, you'll take that all day, Kate. Right? And I think that's why he's so appealing. Mentioned Dak as a comp, like a prospect comp, but I could see him having a very similar like NFL career and being the type of quarterback that we saw Ryan Tannehill. Now that might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but hey, if he's Ryan Tannehill, it's a pretty decent NFL quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we forget. Obviously, there's been some disappointment there for Ryan Tannehill in terms of his recent production, but when we've seen Ryan Tannehill use his legs, he's actually been a pretty fantasy relevant quarterback.
Yep.
I want to go back. I want to shout out his combine because he absolutely
Yes.
crushed the combine in terms of his performance, broad jump, 98th percentile, vertical jump, 92nd percentile, 40-yard dash time, 96th percentile. Like he's a primo athlete. And just adding that with, I think his relative safety as a passer, that equals upside for me. And I'm kind of curious. I want to get into
Yes.
where you think the best fits for him would be. But I obviously we can say that, he's sort of dependent on landing spot in terms of his fantasy upside. But in general, I think among the quarterbacks in this class, I think Desmond Ridder is probably the most disrespected right now for
I agree.
fantasy purposes.
100% agree. And let's talk about where he ranks among the quarterbacks right now in rookie drafts. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat better thanks to Built Bar. And it's because Built Bars are really fun to eat, and they're absolutely awesome, and they taste fantastic. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, 100% real chocolate. They're low calorie, high protein, and they only contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. And it's not even a comparison. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Kate, currently on Dynasty League Football right now, Desmond Ridder is, can you guess? Do you know?
QB5?
QB3. The Dynasty community actually likes Desmond Ridder more than the national media does. So it goes Malik Willis, number 1, Matt Corral, number 2, Desmond Ridder, number 3. Do you agree with that ranking?
I do. I very much, I like Desmond Ridder there as quarterback 3. Although I will say, so that's consensus rankings.
Yes.
When we're looking at ADP for the most recent batch of ADP put out by Dynasty League Football, Desmond Ridder's coming in as being drafted on average as the quarterback 4 behind Malik Willis, Matt Corral. Can you guess who the third quarterback is?
Don't tell me Sam Howell. Don't tell me Sam Howell, Kate.
It's Kenny Pickett, which
Okay.
I'm flabbergasted by.
I think people are going for the safety there because I think they know that Kenny Pickett's probably going to get a chance to play right away, which means you can use him in your Dynasty League.
I mean, I still think the Ridder screams higher upside and like across the board here. I don't think you're going to be able to sell me on drafting Kenny Pickett ahead of Desmond Ridder, period. Now let's talk about like team fits. So
yes,
Desmond Ridder, one of these guys that's being sort of drafted in mocks all over the board. I feel like I haven't seen any like really consistent landing spots. I've seen some websites draft having him as like the consensus pick for the Steelers. If Malik Willis does not fall to number 20 overall, where do you project him going? Because I do feel like it's just been like the narrative has been a bit all over the map here. And, do you think the landing spot for him realistically fits with what might complement him best as a fantasy asset?
Yeah, I think his range starts at like 32 to the Lions, right? And actually, that's my favorite spot. That's where I want him to go because I think his game is a little bit similar to Jared Goff. The only difference is he's just a far better athlete. So if he could sit behind Jared Goff for a year, they already have a very good offensive line, kind of keep working out the playmakers. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think with DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown and TJ Hawkinson, I think that's the kind of offense that would fit Desmond Ridder really, really well. But if he doesn't go there, Atlanta in the second round at pick 43 would make sense. The Colts, if they want to get somebody young at pick 42 to sit behind Matt Ryan, I think that makes a lot of sense. The Saints.
What about Seattle? Seattle's sitting with back-to-back picks, number 40 and 41 over. I like that.
I don't want him to go to Seattle because I'm not sure they're going to be able to run the type of offense that you need him to run. I feel like Ridder's best situation is going to be in a quick strike offense that gets rid of the ball quickly and that can use his legs. I'm not sure that's Seattle.
Okay.
All right, I got a couple more. What about New Orleans at number 49?
Definitely an intriguing option, especially if you keep Michael Thomas in the mix there and he's healthy. Just pairing the two of them up, I think, would just form, right off the bat, one of the best 1-2 duos in terms of the quarterback complementing the skill set of the receiver and vice versa. That would be pretty fun. Plus, you have Alvin Kamara, who we know is one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. One of those quick range options. I like that. I'm open to that. I'll take that.
Now I have to ask you about the Steelers, the fit with the Steelers. Do you like that? Do you not like it? What are your thoughts?
So I think what the Steelers have been doing in terms of getting that ball out quickly, we've seen them run that offense over the last few years as Ben Roethlisberger has slowly melted into a statue and taken form as a solid or as a immobile option in the quarterback. That's kind of the offense they were running. It didn't necessarily work, but I don't think it worked for Ben because he didn't have any ability to escape the pocket. There was no option for a play to develop downfield. That's kind of where I think Desmond Ridder could, similar to a Mitch Trubisky, he can navigate the pocket. He's got a great pocket presence. I wouldn't mind this fit whatsoever. I think poses some upside, and I think you have good enough wide receivers in Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool to reap the benefits.
Can I tell you where I don't want him to go for selfish reasons?
Yes.
I don't want him to be the pick for the Giants in the second round because obviously as a Dallas Cowboy fan, I think Ridder would be a massive upgrade over Daniel Jones. And if the Giants don't have to spend their first 2 picks on a quarterback and they can build the offensive line and you can set them behind Daniel Jones for a year, I think in a Brian Dable offense, which is really spread out and it's a lot of quick throws and it's getting the ball to your playmakers and using your quarterback's athleticism, I think he could be really good there. So that's where I'm hoping he doesn't go.
I mean, I think that's perfectly understandable. And I think it's hard too, because you want, when you're thinking of some of these franchises making that investment in quarterback and finding a potential franchise guy, I feel like, after 49ers fans, they probably want to see all these offenses having to spend up to get their guy.
Yep.
If he were to fall to a team like the Giants at 36 overall, that's got to sting a little bit, knowing some of these teams mortgage their future for their future quarterbacks, and the Giants could get a fresh start at 36. That would be a good thing for their team, but yes, an unfortunate landing spot for you, Marcus.
Yeah. So the big takeaway today is we love Desmond Ridder, and there's quite a few spots in the late first round, top of the second round that we like for Ridder, and he might be one of these guys that needs to sit for a year behind an established veteran, and that's okay. I'm okay being patient here, but because I think his ceiling is a lot higher than what draft Twitter or fantasy Twitter wants to talk about. So we are Desmond Ridder fans. Maybe we'll have to think about taking him in a draft that we're doing later today. Okay, so.
As long as Ryan isn't listening to this.
Yeah, don't listen to this, Ryan.
Yeah.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please check us out on YouTube or Locked On Dynasty over there. Check us out on Twitter as well at Locked On Dynasty. You can follow Kate at FF Ball Blast. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time. Enjoy your week.